Hi, Anthony. Nice to finally meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, Marie.
Before we begin our interview, I would like to inform our viewers that you will be performing and delivering a workshop at the Mixtape Online Festival in November, which is a cooperation of the cultural section of the Cyprus High Commission in the UK with Sardam Interdisciplinary Literature Festival. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't done anything with the High Commission before, so it'll be interesting to see the people who turn up and their response to the workshop, the poetry, and yeah, just kind of discussing various subjects with people online. I guess it's always an exciting thing for me anyway.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it actually. Okay, I'm gonna start from a simple yet complicated question.
Yeah.
A question everybody asks more or less. Why literature? Why poetry?
Thank you. I don't know. Obviously, like I went to school, I was educated, I tried different things. I tried playing an instrument. I used to be part of the sports team. I played football. I've done long distance running, gym. I've done a lot of things, but nothing has ever felt as right or as satisfying or as nourishing as literature, both reading and writing, like both the creative aspect and the kind of practical aspect as well. So I think it's just the way that I'm wired, and I ask a lot of writers this kind of question. And obviously, if you had a choice, you might do things a bit differently. But it's a bit like swimming. Some people can do it very well, and it feels very natural to them, and others struggle. So I think for me, it's always been. I've been writing since I was 13, 14. So it's always been something I've been interested in. Language. I think it begins with being interested in language first, and then obviously crossing over into books later on. But I didn't actually get into books until I was in my 20s. So I got into it quite late. But the fascination for languages and poetry was from very young.
Okay, cool. But what about literary performance? You're a spoken word artist as well. You're into slamming, spoken word performances. And actually, I have noted here that you became the first young poet to win the London Mayor's Poetry Slam, which is quite fascinating, with your poem Anthropos, human in Greek. So why are you also interested in performance? Is that also a way to kind of nourish your mind and your body? Is it something that interests you as much as writing? Is it combined? Do these two always go together? How do you?
I don't think they do. I know very good performers. You can give them anything and they bring it to life on the stage. And then I know very good poets who aren't the best performers or readers of their poetry. So it all just depends. One, it depends on the nature of the language. Like more concrete poems need a page to work on, whereas spoken word is designed to be read, to be put into a live context. So the way that the language is calibrated is a really big part of that. But I think for me, performance, I was drawn to it mainly because of the fact that you had complete control over the way in which a poem was received. You could put your body into it, you could put your voice into it, and you could signal things that I didn't necessarily know how to signal on a page. Dramatic pauses, intensity, crescendos. You can get quiet, you can get loud, you can get really animated. So all these different kind of theatrical characteristics I I was interested in. I never studied drama. I didn't go to drama school. I watched a lot of performances. I watched people perform. I thought, wow, that's quite spellbinding. I like the idea of transcendence. When you watch a performance, the performer has transcended. And then I became interested in the kind of contract between audience and performer, particularly in comedy. You know, like when you go to watch a comedy show, what are you expecting? When you go and watch a poetry reading, what are you expecting? And then I started to think about the audience more, like what do they want from me? What is my writing supposed to do? And I realized that it was quite prescriptive. It was quite formulaic. That spoken word was actually a lot more limiting than what I thought it would be. And I realized that there's different ways to perform. You can stand in front of a microphone for 5 minutes and only move your arm once. That's a performance. You don't have to be thespian, you don't have to be theatrical or animated to communicate something. So what I started to realize is that where I was using my body, I felt that my writing was lacking. So I was using my body to compensate for the lack of poetic thinking in my work. So I started to go the other way. I was like, right, let me try and work the language harder and use my body less, to take myself out of the poem, me as an entity, out of the poem, and let the language do the work, let the poetry do the work, so I don't have to, you know. And then that led me into, you know, the space that I'm in now, where I just write and I just read. I don't memorize the poems so much anymore. I read them off the page, and I write concrete poems. I write for the page. I write them to be seen and experienced around the white space.
You also organize poetry nights in London, or you used to organize them. You actually founded them, outspoken poetry nights. So you're kind of interested in organizing events of reading poetry and performing poetry. How do you feel about that? Was it something that interested you from the beginning, or something that came up in the process?
So yeah, Outspoken, I set that up in 2012, and the idea behind that, I mean, I was still quite new. I'd only been performing 2-3 years in London, and the idea behind it was that we'd have a space that was democratic, that was inclusive, but that also meant that we would bridge the gap between page and stage, performance poetry and page poetry. There's a lot of kind of academic writing that is polarizing these two disciplines, and they kind of put one, you know, they'll say something like spoken word is the less sophisticated version than the page poem. So I wanted to have a space where both artists, both, you know, page poets and spoken word artists could come and perform their work. That was the original thought. I had an additional thought on top of that that said, why don't I create a night that doesn't have an open mic night? Because everywhere that I was reading at and performing at had open mic, and sometimes, you know, if you were a feature act, you'd be put on last, and a lot of the time that meant 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. The audience were absolutely knackered. There'd been about, you know, 12, 15 open micers that are all doing a 5-minute poem with a break. I just thought, this is a lot of work just to get to the feature act. So my idea was just to have 3 poets and then break it up with musicians. I have 2 musicians coming as well, and to kind of, yeah, break up the night. And I had access. I knew poets then. I knew spoken word artists. I knew musicians because I did a degree in commercial music at university. So I had friends who were in bands or singer-songwriters. And I just started inviting the people that I knew to begin with. And I had quite a big following as well. I had 2 poems that went viral on YouTube in 2012. And so there was a lot of people that wanted to see me read. So I kind of thought, you know what, I'm going to put myself on the bill. And I knew that people were I get messages all the time, when are you next performing? I want to come and see you read. I want to come and hear your poems. And so the night began from there. And the first night we had like over 100 people, and we had to stop letting people in. It was in Camden, in Proud, at Proud Galleries in Camden Town. And I just thought first the idea was to do it bi-monthly, so once every other month. But because the appetite and the response to it was so good, we thought, let's just keep it up. And so through the years, you know, the night changed. I brought people in who work with me. There's 8 people now that work with me. The Arts Council funded now. And we have a residency at the South Bank Centre, which is like the biggest cultural hub in Europe. So it's amazing to see it's gone from a small little, you know, idea that I had on the train to now being one of the biggest nights. I think it's probably one of the biggest poetry nights in Europe, if not the biggest in regards to audience. You know, we get 300-400 people every month that fill out the auditorium, and we've had literary figures, you know, across the kind of Anglosphere, from America, Australia, Canada, and the UK. So yes, I'm really proud of it. I just can't wait for COVID to be over so we can get back to doing it again, because at the moment it's all still lockdown.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Exciting stuff. I hope I manage to, you know, join one day and watch all these amazing things you're doing there. Okay, let's kind of change subject for a moment. Your mother is from Nicosia and your father from Famagusta, am I right? But you were born and raised in the UK. So how has this influenced your writing? And I think this is a question you like to answer.
This is a topic. For me. This is my life's work revolves around these questions. I think being part of the diaspora and you know, being third generation Cypriot, so to speak, and identifying as a Cypriot more than I do Greek or Turkish or any of the other kind of ideological kind of prefixes that come with being Cypriot. I'm a British Cypriot, which is that's the prefix that I use. I'm not Cypriot, but I feel that the Cypriot identity is one of the most complex and ambiguous identities that I've come to wrestle with. I became very fascinated with African history, and I started reading a lot in my late 20s. And obviously, African history leads to constructions of race and racism and slavery, as well as, you know, ancient Africa, which had some of the most sophisticated civilizations known to humanity. And that led me into wanting to read up more about how Cypriots were, what we're made up of, and what it means to be Cypriot to people here and people living in Australia, America, and the UK. And so my work wrestles with those tensions because it's not clear cut. It's not one single answer. Like, we're not Greek, we're not English, we're not American. But then to be Cypriot gets absorbed a lot of the time because of from 1960 onwards, you become absorbed into the hegemonies of Greece or Turkey. So people just identify as either Greek or Turkish, or Greeks of Cyprus or Turks of Cyprus, which I don't think is accurate either. There's an erasure that happens, which I was talking with others, which I've been speaking about for many years, is the fact that there is a kind of cultural erasure when we identify as Greek. And why do we do that? You know, when we're not from Greece. I have no family in Greece. I don't understand people from Greece. I don't look like people from Greece. I come to Cyprus and the people look different to the people from Europe and from Greece. Like, they look a lot more mixed here, very dark. Some people look Arab, some people look Asian, some people look European. And so I kind of feel that to deny that, to get rid of that and just say you're Greek, is very reductive. And so my work wrestles with ideas of whiteness, ideas of race, construction. And I think Cyprus is a very good example of where race and taxonomies fall apart, because there's people that live on this island that do not look like white European people. There is no way on earth you can look that person in the face and say you're a white European. And there's other people that do. And so it's a bit like South America as well, where you have so many mixed up groups of people, and how they present. And so I think that's really what I'm interested in. And also colonialism, you know, the British Empire. The British were here until 1960. They're still here. You know, they're one of the guarantors. It's just a very fascinating island, and to look at the different groups that have colonized it. The first time that it was independent was in 1960 in the island's history. Ever since then, it's been part of a province or a kind of protectorate of another empire, of a colony, the Ottomans, the Venetians, the Persians, the British, the French. So yeah, I find it interesting.
Okay, so this kind of blurring of boundaries, this different way of seeing and perceiving people and things is also reflected in your latest work, After the Formalities, which was actually shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot 2019 Poetry Prize. Can you tell us a bit about that book?
So the book is looking at three subjects that are all interwoven. It's looking at fatherhood, it's looking at empire, and it's looking at race. And so particularly the Cypriot race, and looking at how ideas of race, migration, have shaped thinking and shaped experience, interpersonal relations, social cohesion, and things like this. And in the UK at the moment, you know, we have a lot of problems with racist groups, with nationalist groups, with white supremacist groups, and so I'm very much involved in those kind of activist circles that are opposing both intellectually and artistically a lot of these right-wing agendas. And so the book for me was a way of kind of my contribution to the conversation of looking at race as a historical document, as a kind of progression, something that is ever changing, it's not fixed. You know, if we think about groups of people now who pass as white, Italians, Irish, Jewish people, up until, you know, you had the Nuremberg laws in the mid 20th century that said that Eastern European Jews were not white people. But now obviously they are, as are Italians, as are Greeks, as are Spanish and Portuguese and Turks. You know, Turkish people occupy a space where, are they white, are they not white? And so I kind of feel that the book wrestles with these ambiguities, and then interwoven is fatherhood, and fatherhood is a response to empire, because I find that the patriarchy, fatherhood, masculinity, and empire have very similar characteristics and traits. Like, to remember that the British agenda, part of the kind of British imperialist project, the agenda was paternalism. So the parentalism, the idea was that they go and they teach the uncivilized world what it meant to be civilized, and which again lends itself to fatherhood and patriarchy and male dominance. So the book is very much kind of feeding and moving around a lot of those ideas.
Okay, is this hybridity also reflected in a possible hybridity of the text itself? Are you kind of experimenting with different narrative forms, linguistic forms, etc., in your work?
Yeah, and I think the hybridity is, I've always been fascinated because of who we are as Cypriot people. You know, when I spoke to a Cypriot academic last year, she said she defined it as an island of hybridity. And that really kind of, you know, it's a culture, it's a group of people that have absorbed cultures and languages and ethnography from around the Middle East, Asia, Europe, North Africa. You know, and you see it. And so I felt that to have a poetic that could reflect that experimentalism, hybridity, not being able to, being okay with not knowing. There's a lot of ambiguous poems, there's tricky poems, there's strange poems. And for me, it's about being okay with not knowing or not being sure. And that's what I'm trying to pass on to the reader, is that I don't know. I'm the writer, and there's things about race and the kind of relationships that people have with each other that I'm still not entirely, I haven't worked out. And that's what the poems are expressing.
And so, do you actually write to change things, to change our perception of things, to change yourself, not to change anything? I mean, Okay, this changes as well as time passes in a writer's work. We never have the answer to that question, but what do you think?
I think that's it. When I was younger and I began writing spoken word, I was moralizing. Um, it was a lot more sanctimonious. It was more righteous, like you say. It was rhetorical. I had an agenda. I wanted to convince people that my way of thinking and experiencing and seeing the world was the right way. So you use language in more manipulative ways. You use language that is more persuasive, that is more seductive, that is more emotive. And then as I got older, I started to realize that my views were changing. And I didn't really have a right to assume that everyone should think like me or that I should be speaking on behalf of everyone. You know, like I'm a Cypriot, sure, but that doesn't mean that the guy sitting over there, his views are any less valued than mine, or her views are less valued than mine. And so I started to think about the role the I played in poetry, you know, and the we, the speakers in the poems. What's their purpose? Who are they addressing? What do they want? And it moved from a place of change to a place of inquiry. And now I make inquiries with my work. Like I interrogate a preoccupation, an obsession that I have. I'm interrogating it. I'm exploring it. And sometimes you use language because of its elasticity. Language can wrap around the abstract. It can wrap around phenomena in a way that other modes can't. And so I kind of feel that when you use language, you calibrate it to go beyond the confines of limited speak and limited thought, you're then entering the realm of poetry. And so, however people read it, I don't have a control over that. If their minds are changed, if they're made to feel empathy, if they're made to feel angered, if they're made to feel remorse, if it's restorative, fine. The fact that they're having an emotional response to it and their senses are awake, that for me is all I want. The rest, I can't control. And even if they think this is shit, that's fine too. They might think, I don't understand any of this. What is this man talking about? This is rubbish. All good. You've had a response. You've responded viscerally to the writing.
Yeah, they say that you don't want readers to just cherish your work. If you kind of create different kinds of reactions, it means your work is actually doing something out there. But do you actually believe in creative writing workshops? Because I know that you're delivering creative writing workshops, and there is a big debate around whether writing can be taught. I actually believe in creative writing workshops. I believe that they can open spaces. You're not teaching, you're actually presenting possibilities and encouraging people to work with them. But what do you think as a person who is so active in the UK right now?
Yeah, I fully agree and believe and think that they are massively beneficial. I think that it goes back to the old saying of, you can teach someone how to play the guitar, but you can't teach them what to play. And I think that's basically it for me, is for what the workshops writing is a way of thinking. It's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of responding and organizing. And what happens a lot of the time is people that haven't attended a lot of workshops or that are still quite, new to their writing, they have a very direct, immediate response to things that they want to write about. And so what you do in these workshops is you equip them with skills, with techniques that can sharpen not just the language on the page, but also how they think and how they distill information. Like it's the easy thing to do is to write about the kid crying across the street. The harder thing to do is write about why he's crying. That's a bigger question. And so, these workshops, I kind of see them as a means of endowing people, equipping people with skills, tools that they can use to develop and progress their writing. And I've been doing it for 12 years, and there's things that there's writers now that I worked with 5-6 years ago that have got books published, that are doing really great things, and I've seen the development and the work they've put in. But we have to remember also that reading is a form of writing as well. So it's about how you read, what you read, and the ways in which you read. Do you read leisurely, casually, or are you forensic? Do you read investigatively? Do you pull the language apart and unpack the ideas subtextually? And these are the things that I try to, encourage and advocate for within the workshops. And a lot of the time, people just don't know where to go. They have ideas, but they don't know how to organize them. They don't know how to present them on a page. And so your job is to say, right, this is how we make this tighter. This is how we make this sharper. This is a trope. This is a cliche. This is too direct. This needs to be more nuanced. And so all that kind of stuff is the craft of writing, I guess, which you have to learn. Like you can learn the craft, but what the poems that you make, or the short stories, or the novels, or the essays that you write, once you know the craft, you have an understanding of it. That's completely separate.
Maybe you would like to say something or share something with our viewers.
I'd like to ask you, what do you get from literature, from books? What does it mean?
Now we're switching.
Yeah.
No, sir. This is an interview of Anthony Anaxagorou.
I'm interested. I know it's an interview, but I'm also interested in just what you get from literature. Like you're involved in it as well. But it doesn't have to be expansive. It can just be a few lines on what it means to you.
Yeah, this changes every minute. I mean, one moment I feel I have the answer to that question. Next moment, everything kind of collapses. So it's a question that I can never answer. But this specific moment, I think literature kind of gives me that cocoon where I can feel well and create and kind of affect the world around me. And I'm not saying affect the world in the sense like tell people what they need to do, but like really offer something to the world, really contribute in that sense. And also it's a way not to lose my sanity. Actually, that's something that I always had in mind when I was writing. Writing was the place to be when I needed some balance or some release.
Do you feel it's cathartic?
Not always. It used to be in the beginning, but sometimes it's tormenting. Sometimes it's, heartbreaking. Other times it's masochistic. There are so many dimensions of it now.
For sure. I think that's good. Like a lot of people assume that writers write for catharsis, but it's not. Like you say, it's very tormenting. It's agonizing. It's arduous. You have to stay thinking about things that upset you, things that confuse you, that confound you. Like you have to stay on them. Where most people be like, I'm not going to entertain that thought because it's an uncomfortable thought, or it's not a nice thought, or this was a painful time in my life, or this was a bad memory. But poets stay there, and it's about unpacking the wound, unpacking the scars, and seeing what's inside, which is a lot. And not even that, it's developing a language, it's inventing a new language for things that have happened to you. So not only are you interrogating yourself, you're also having to develop an entirely new way of thinking and speaking and writing about this thing. So it's like a double whammy, like unpack it and now give me a new language as well. It's just like, whoa, that's a lot of work around this thing.
Yeah, a lot of writers spend quite some time trying to find a new theme or something that hasn't been presented before. But I think it's important to actually try and say something in a different way, trying to find a different way of saying what other people have said, other writers have said, or to my mind, that's an interesting place to be as a writer. Sometimes, not always.
For sure, yeah.
Cool. So I think we're done. Although I really enjoy this conversation, we could be talking for a long time. Maybe we meet up for some drinks at some point.
Yeah. I'm here for another week. So yeah, let me know when you're about.
And I'm sure everybody will enjoy Mixtape Online Festival and your performance and your workshop. You had really interesting things to say. I feel very happy that you're doing what you're doing in the UK and you're doing amazing things. As a writer, as a performer, as an organizer of events, as a creative writing tutor, not a lot of writers have this complexity in their identity as a person who creates things. So I really admire that, and I also believe we need a lot. So I want to wish you the very best of luck with everything.
Amazing.
And see you soon. All the best.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.